Anybody who is married is well aware of the power of silence. When your wife gets quiet, which is not often, something is about to blow up. And you want to be careful about it. But somehow or another, when we come to religion, we do not understand the power of silence. We just don't quite grasp it. We might notice a couple of passages. One is that one in Habakkuk, the 2nd chapter, verse 20. The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. It's time to be quiet. You know, these days everybody's hollering and protesting and cheering and so forth. There's just a time to shut up and start listening. And when the Lord's quiet, we ought to be careful. In 1 Peter 4 and verse 11, if any man speak, let him speak as the oracles of God. If any man minister, let him do it as of the ability which God giveth, that God in all things may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom be praise and dominion forever and ever. If any man speak, speak as the oracles of God. So when the Bible speaks, we speak, and when the Bible doesn't speak, it's time to be quiet and not put in your own opinions or thoughts or suggestions. The denominations around us respect neither the precepts of God, many of which they will deny, and they don't respect his silence either. Christians have begun to emphasize the idea of we must obey his commands. We have a little trouble sometimes figuring out what those commands are, but we have to obey the commands. But when it comes to his silence, we think that we have the ability, the opportunity to speak up, to put in our own opinions, to suggest things that the Bible doesn't even talk about. If we believe, and we're not necessarily going to try to prove that to you today, but we could. If you believe that the Bible is a sufficient guide for your life, then that simple idea demands silence when there's nothing in the Bible about it. So as you're looking for authority for your life, as you're looking for authority for the church, when the Bible doesn't say anything, there isn't any authority. That doesn't mean you can speak up. That doesn't mean you can put in your own ideas. In 2 Timothy 3, verse 16 and 17, all Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be perfect. Everything you need is there. Oh, but it's silent about this other stuff. Then you don't need it. You don't need to do it. You shouldn't engage in it. Truly furnished, completely furnished unto all good works. There's a lot of church problems that hinge on a failure just to pay respect to the fact that God is silent. We're going to show you some of those eventually. But let's notice the Bible teaching about the idea of the importance of simple silence when the Bible doesn't say anything. Look with me in Deuteronomy 4 and verse 2 as the first passage. He says, ye shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall ye diminish aught from it, that ye may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you. Now, we perhaps understand that we can't take anything out. You'd be shocked if I stood up here and I ripped a page out. But wouldn't you be just as shocked if I picked up a piece of paper and said, here, we're going to add this one to the book. We're going to add this to the Bible. Here's something else that I think is important that needs to be put in here. In Jeremiah 23 and verse 31, behold, I am against the prophets, saith the Lord, that use their tongues and say, he saith. Now we've entered, for the last few years, we've been in a society that is desperate to be politically correct. Well, sometimes that politically correct stuff is not what the Bible says. So don't let people be telling you, hey, this is the way you should be according to God's word and will. In 1 Samuel 8, behold, thou art old, and walk not and thy sons walk not in thy ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. The thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed unto the Lord. The Lord said unto Samuel, hearken unto the voice of the people, and all that they say unto thee. They have not rejected me, they've rejected me, that I should not reign over them. What happened? God didn't say anything to them about a king. They didn't need a king. He was selecting judges to rule them. He defended them to that point, protected them. Now they wanted something better, something they thought of, something like all the nations around us. And who was that a rejection of? Well, Samuel said, they don't seem to like me very much. No, it's not a rejection of you, Samuel. God says they've rejected me and the system I set up. In Leviticus 10, in the first 2 verses. And you need to learn this. Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took either of them his censer and put fire therein and put incense thereon and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he commanded them not. And there went out fire from the Lord and devoured them, and they died before the Lord. Now let me tell you what that's talking about. Out in front of the tabernacle was the altar of burnt offering. And inside the tabernacle, in the holy place, was the altar of incense. And they were instructed to take coals from the altar of burnt offering. There'd always be coals there because they were always offering. They'd put that in a little pan, and they'd bring that in to the altar of incense. They'd put those coals there, and then they'd put incense on it to make a smell. The smell, God had chosen the incense, by the way, before the Lord. It signaled their time of prayer and went up before God as if it were a prayer. Well, these boys, for some reason or another, didn't want to do that. They offered what this passage called strange fire. Now, I don't know what that means. Maybe they had matches. They did have matches. But somehow or another, they got their fire from some other source in some other way than God had directed them. Now, that just seems like a small thing. Fire is fire, right? But it was strange fire. It was not as he had directed. And God punished them. What? You know, God didn't go through a list and say, now don't get your fire from over there, and don't get your fire from a match, and don't use a blowtorch, and don't use a cigarette lighter. Don't do all that. He didn't say all that. He had told them what to do, and he was silent about anything else. They decided they could do something else. And lo and behold, they were struck dead for it. You might notice another passage, and Alan studied this with us up here in our adult class just the other day. There's a fellow over in Africa, in Nigeria. Oh, I would love to get him over here just so he could preach a sermon on this passage. He does the best job of anybody I ever saw. He talks about David bringing the ark up. You remember the ark had been captured. The ark of God had been captured, not Noah's ark. That ark with the angels on top of it. It had been captured by the Philistines and was being held there in a house for a long time. And David wanted to bring it up to Jerusalem. And he made a cart for it. Now that sounds like, a little wagon, but I don't think it was like that. My wife and I, a few years ago, many years ago, drove out to California for a debate with kids. And we were in Pasadena. I think it was a day, 2 days before the Rose Parade. I never heard a woman whine so much in my life. She says, I've always wanted to see the Rose Parade. Well, the last place I wanted to be was in Pasadena, California during the Rose Bowl. So we got out of town and got out of California, really, as fast as we could. But she has never let me forget that. But you know, have you ever looked at that parade and seen the big, man, those are wagons, but they're big monster things. And they got flowers all over them. They're just beautiful. I think David had that sort of wagon. He got the finest thing they could make. And he decorated it up as nicely as it could be done. He didn't just have an old farm wagon out there. He had the nicest thing they could get. It was pretty. It was beautiful. He was showing respect to God in his own eyes. But do you kids remember how the ark was supposed to be carried? Have you studied about that any? Jonathan, you seem to be the senior member here on the front row. Well, maybe at 4, may have been 8 or 16, I don't know, but it was a 4 divisible by 4. How were they supposed to carry it? It had rings on the side, didn't it? And they had a big pole. They're supposed to carry it on their shoulders. That's how he wanted to carry it. A specific family that was supposed to carry it. Well, David didn't do that. He thought he could do better. Well, God didn't say, don't carry it that way. He was silent about that. He just told him what to do and was silent about carrying it any other way. Well, in the process of carrying it, David arose in verse 2 and went with all the people that were with him from Baal of Judah to bring up from thence the ark of God, whose name is called by the name of the Lord of hosts, that dwelleth between the cherubims. They set the ark of God upon a new cart and brought it out of the house of Abinadab that was in Gibeah, and Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, drove the cart. Woo! Have you ever been on a big horse-drawn wagon? Ooh, that you sit up high. Ooh, Lord, you got the reins in your hand. Makes you feel like you got all the power in the world. You got those pretty horses out there, just prancing, beautiful. In this case, it may have been oxen. But they're beautiful too. Big old fat, beautiful things. Everybody's around you hollering and dancing and blowing horns, and there's music, and it's pretty and it's beautiful. Wonderful day. And in their hearts were just as pure as they could be in a love for God. Did you know that? They were sincere, innocent, pure. But none of that mattered. You know, there's an awful lot of people who have a great love for God, and their hearts are pure. They're sincere. And they're worshiping God in the best way they can. But it's not what God said do. It's just not what he said do. David and all the house of Israel played before the Lord on all manner of instruments made of fir wood, even on harps and psalteries and timbrels and cornets and cymbals. You play a sort of cornet, don't you, Jonathan? Big old, you know what a cornet is, don't you? It's a trumpet, Jonathan, sort of a trumpet. And your baritone is sort of a tuba. But you play on those things. And they were blowing and hollering and having a big time. And when they came to Nachon's threshing floor, man, it began to bump. It was bumpy, kind of like maybe had all those holes out in the road like it's out on our roads to break your axle. And here Uzzah, he's driving the cart, you know. He reached back. He put forth his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen shook it. They were bouncing across the threshing floor. It was rutting. The anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God smote him there for his error. You weren't supposed to touch it. And there he died by the ark of God. And David was displeased because the Lord had made a breach upon Uzzah, and he gave it Uzzah's name to this day. And David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, how shall the ark of God come to me? So David would remove the ark of the Lord unto him from the city to the city of David. He carried it aside into the house of Obed-Edom. I bet he carried it the right way too. And the ark continued there for 3 months. They were sincere. Why? What mistake had they made? They didn't respect God's silence. They didn't respect his silence. He hadn't said anything about putting it on a fancy card. One more passage in this regard. Look at Numbers 4:5. Aaron, when in his Numbers 4:5 had made an end of covering the sanctuary, all the vessels as the camp is set forward. After that, the sons of Kohath shall come to bear it. They shall not touch any holy thing lest they die. These things are the burden of the sons of Kohath, the tabernacle of the congregations. In 1 Samuel 13, here another thing. Saul's ready and anxious to go out to battle. He's got his army gathered up. They're all fired up. You know, they've been singing patriotic songs for 7 days. They've been practicing with their swords and bows and slings, and they're ready to go. We're just waiting for a sacrifice, waiting for Samuel to come and offer a sacrifice. Just waiting. And then, you know, after 7 days, I tell you what, I can party for a while. 7 days is out of the question for me, you know, days. I'm lucky to manage for an hour and a half, then it's bedtime. But they'd gone for 7 days. They were fired up. But now, that Philistine army's getting close, and they're beginning to say, you know, we're all brave here, but they began to sneak off. And Saul got worried. He got disgusted because Samuel was taking too long, and he offered the sacrifice. He was a Benjamite. He didn't have any business offering sacrifices. He wasn't a priest. And God took away the kingdom from him for it. Why? He was sincere. He wanted to offer sacrifice to God. God hadn't said, not going to have any Benjamites offering. Notice some passages in the New Testament. In Matthew 15 and verse 9, the Lord warned, in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. You need to be careful. Just because people are religious, just because they're good people, just because they're very sincere in what they do, doesn't make it pleasing to God. You might notice another passage, Galatians 1, verse 8. Though we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel unto you than that which we have heard, we have preached unto you, let him be accursed. You know, so here you have what the Bible says, and you have this big area of silence where God didn't say anything. And so somebody decides, I can add into that. Let him be accursed. You might notice another passage in 2 John 9. He says, whosoever transgresseth and abideth not in the doctrine of Christ hath not God. He that abideth in the doctrine of Christ, he hath both the Father and the Son. You're going to listen to Christ, and when Christ is silent, you're going to let him be silent. In Revelation 22, verse 18, he says, I testify unto every man that heareth the words of the prophecy of this book, if any man shall add unto these things, God shall add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. You don't have any business stuffing it in, even when God's silent. Well, let's think but just a little bit further. Let's notice some examples of silence in the Bible. In Hebrews 1, verses 4 and 5, being made so much better than the angels, Jesus, as he hath by inheritance obtained a more excellent name than they, for unto which of the angels said he at any time, Thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee. Pay attention to that. He's arguing from silence. He says, which of the angels did he ever tell, Thou art my son? None. Every now and then you find somebody comes along and says Jesus was an angel. This says he wasn't an angel. There are some religions that believe he was an angel. This said he wasn't an angel because he never said that to any of the angels. Notice another passage in Hebrews verse 13. To which of the angels said he at any time, Sit on my right hand till I make thine enemies thy footstool? Jesus, the Lord never said that about any of the angels. Silence. He's arguing from silence there. You might notice Hebrews 7, verse 12. The priesthood being changed, there's made of necessity a change of the law. He of whom these things are spoken pertaineth to another tribe, of which no man gave attendance at the altar. Why? Why did nobody give attendance at the altar from any other tribe? Oh, come on, get back to Brian. Here we go. Why did nobody else? Why? You know, you had the tribe of Levi that were priests. Why didn't anybody else get to serve? There was Judah. There were good, sincere, fine men in Judah, and there was Benjamin, and there was Naphtali, and all through all those tribes. Why couldn't any of the good people from those tribes be priests? Well, he says, it is evident that our Lord sprang out of Judah, of which tribe Moses spake nothing concerning priesthood. He couldn't be a priest according to the law. Jesus was never a priest according to the law of Moses. That's what Hebrews goes on to tell you. It said he was after the order of Melchizedek. You might notice Acts 15. He says, we've heard that certain which went out from us have troubled you with words, subverting your souls, saying you must be circumcised and keep the law, to whom we gave no such commandment. He said, we were silent about that. We didn't tell him you had to do that. They decided to add it in. Now then, somebody says, well, I'm just substituting. We're just going to substitute. Now we're not replacing, we're just substituting. Well, let's think about that. He says, give not that which in Matthew 7, verse 6, give not that which is holy unto dogs, neither cast ye your pearls before swine, lest they trample them. Ask and it shall be given you. Seek and knock and you shall be opened. It shall be opened unto you. Everyone that asketh receiveth. He that seeketh findeth. To him that knocketh it shall be opened. What man is there of you whom if his son ask bread, will he give him a stone? That's no good. You can't substitute. Your son wants bread, give him bread. Don't give him a rock. If he says, or if he asks a fish, you're going to pick up a snake and give him a fish? Or give him a snake? If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts unto your children, how much more shall your Father give good gifts unto you? He says, and then he goes on to warn about entering in at the straight gate, instead of following the broad way to destruction. But notice another idea. I want you to think about a landscape. We do a lot of landscaping in my business. And there's a landscaping plot. You can see it here. here's your lot. You see all the stuff here. We're going to develop this lot. We got it drawn out. Up here's the septic tank. Over here's a bush. Here's a tree. Over here's the city easement. You can't build out there, you know. And shrubs, and then here's the walk. Sounds good. So we call up Nathaniel and say, hey, go out there and develop this lot. And he says, man, I hate that septic tank back there. I don't like the way that was drawn. I'm going to put the septic tank right here. Nothing like a septic tank in your front yard, is there? And I don't want that tree there. I'm going to put that tree right over here where the drive is. Well, what are the people going to do when they come out to look at the work Nathaniel's done? They're going to say, hey, there was an architect's drawing of where that tree was supposed to be, and you put it right flat dab in the middle of the drive. What are you, knuckleheaded? Then you go, Dad, I got a problem here. And by the way, I just didn't need a septic tank in my front yard. Thank you very much. That's going to smell good on a good rainy day. Dad, we got a problem. You need to call the lawyer. We're being sued. You understand that? But then Nathaniel said, no, wait a minute. Wait, you didn't say don't build that tree. Don't plant that tree here. He said, hey, we told you where to put it. And by the way, you didn't say don't put that septic tank here. We didn't have to. We told you to put it in the backyard, you knucklehead. We didn't have to tell you to put it any one of 500 places. Why didn't you put it where it was supposed to be? Well, it just didn't seem good. That's not going to work, is it? We all understand that. Well, let's think of another idea, sort of along the same line. All right, so, Raymond, we're going to imagine you're a little older. How's that sound? We're going to imagine you're 16. And you've passed your driver's test, right? Your mother says, Raymond, go down to Kroger's and bring home some milk and eggs. Milk and eggs. You got that, Raymond? And here's $20. So, Raymond squeals the tires, drives over the shrubbery on his way out, scares people to death, runs into a lamppost. But he finally gets to Kroger's. You kids are like that. Just remember this. Raymond finally gets to Kroger's. And he goes in Kroger's and he says, well, I don't want bread. That's kind of boring. They got those Krispy Kreme donuts right over here. That's sort of a bread. I'll get that. Who wants eggs? They got sausage right over there. I like sausage for breakfast. Forget that. And by the way, there's $20 in eggs and donuts. Don't cost $20. I got extra money. And over here, there are Snickers bars. A bunch of them. I can get them. I can eat one and hide 6. Because I'm not sharing them with my brother. And he comes home. Says, Mom, I brought you donuts and sausage. What are you doing? I told you to get bread and eggs. He says, you didn't say not to get sausage. You didn't say not to get donuts, Mom. You didn't say not. You didn't tell him about Snickers, did you? You didn't say not to. She says, I didn't have to, Raymond. I told you what to get, and where's the change out of that 20, you bum? There may be some more words about the damage to the car on the way down to the store, but that's another story. I think you can understand this. This is pretty easy. You didn't bring that grocery bag home the way you should. The nature of a command tells us what pleases God. It tells us what needs to be done. We just can't be certain where there's silence. We don't have any business jumping in there. Now then, my wife's birthday is coming up, we're going to imagine. and we've been married a long time. She has every gadget, gizmo known to the mind of man. She's got 14 vacuum cleaners. You know, the other day yesterday, I caught her out. She's cleaning out the car. And Nathaniel, that fine young man there, bought at Costco, his favorite place, had bought a 5-horsepower vacuum cleaner for the garage that mounts on the wall. You can take off, and it will just suck the living daylights out of the dirt in your car. Well, I come out and I see her. I said, "What are you doing?" She says, "I'm vacuuming the car." I said, "Why aren't you using that 5-horsepower wonder Nathaniel put up?" Because what she was using was an old little canister vacuum cleaner that the wheels had fallen off about 5 years ago. And I think the switch doesn't really work. It's just always on if you plug it in. Well, anyway, so that's the kind of woman I'm dealing with. "What do you want for your birthday, dear?" Please don't hint. Your silence is going to get you nothing. It's going to get me walking around CVS late at night, right before they close, and bringing you something you really don't want. I need something beyond your silence. Give me a hint. Give me some kind of pointer. You understand that, right? Because if you just stick with that silence, you're guaranteed to do the wrong thing. Well, there's been a number of religious divisions over silence. Where did the name Lutheran Church come from? Not in the Bible, is it? Where did the name Presbyterian Church come from? It's not in the Bible. Where did the name Methodist Church come from? Not in the Bible. We can go through a lot of others. But all those, that's created so much division. Why? Well, it seemed like a good name for a church. It's not in the Bible. Why not use some description that's in the Bible? What about sprinkling? Man, kind of inconvenient. You know, when you baptize people, we have to get all wet. Sometimes here in the winter, it's cold. We have to traipse out to a creek or a lake, or we have to have a baptistry. Why not just sprinkle? It's just, somebody says it's just sort of symbolic anyway, and this can be just about as symbolic. Well, just sprinkle. The Bible doesn't say anything about that. It says they went down into the water, came up out of the water. It says baptism's a burial. It doesn't say anything about sprinkling. Well, what about babies? What about babies? There's Isaac there. What about babies? Maybe we need to sprinkle old Isaac. Well, you come up with this idea that Isaac's somehow guilty of original sin. We're just worried about him. What if he were to die? He tried to fall down my steps the other day. That could have been it. But maybe we need to sprinkle him, baptize him. The Bible doesn't say anything about baptizing him. It says you've got to be a believer. How in the world would you baptize Isaac? What about the papacy? That hierarchy and other governmental arrangements, synods, conventions of churches. Not in the Bible. The Bible's silent about it. You think we've got liberty to jump right in there when those aren't in there? You know, what about the missionary society? In the 1850s, the Lord's church divided over the missionary society. They decided that we've got to get all the churches of Christ in the country together to send money to an organization that's going to send missionaries. I think the first one they sent was to England, and the next one went to Palestine. We're going to send missionaries over there. Where does the Bible talk about that society? It never does. What seemed like a really good idea, and the men and women who are involved in all of these things are sincere, thoughtful, religious people. Bible doesn't say anything about it. It's silent about it. Well, what about a prayer wheel? You ever seen one of those? Ever seen one? Just every time it goes around, you say a prayer. You know, you put it in a stream of water or let it blow in the wind like a whirligig. The Bible doesn't say anything about those. What about having the Lord's Supper on Thursday night? It's convenient, and then you get the whole weekend to yourself. The Bible doesn't say anything about that. It says it's on the first day of the week, and it's quiet about Thursday night. Well, what about something besides the Lord's Supper? You know, bread and fruit of the vine. Maybe we could have hamburgers. Maybe we could have water. Water's a lot cheaper. We could even have bottled water. It's still cheap. Doesn't go bad. Why not have those? It's just sort of a symbol anyway. The Bible doesn't say we can't, does it? Nope, doesn't say a word about it. What about praying through to salvation? The Bible doesn't say anything about that. Doesn't say not to, but it doesn't say to do it. What about holidays? We got a big one coming up here a little while. We got Valentine's Day coming up. I don't know if that's a religious holiday, but pretty close. Then we got Easter after that. We got Halloween in the fall. We got Christmas. Do you read about any of those in your Bible? Just not there. Just not there. But we've got liberty to stick those in, don't we? Nope. Not if you're careful. The sponsoring church arrangement. You know, some guys came up with the idea that we need a nationwide TV program. Well, nobody can afford, no single church can afford that. So we're all going to send our money down to some church in Texas, and they're going to put on a TV program for us. Now that has multiplied and multiplied and multiplied into any number of different good works put on by sincere people. What about benevolent organizations? You know, we got orphan homes and old folks' homes. Boy, I'm getting kind of concerned about the old folks' home thing. It'd be nice to have a cheap old folks' home and one where there's only Christians there. But this church can't afford that. So let's go together with about 15 others and let's start as a, what about a college? And, you know, I'm not too worried about a college. But man alive, I sure would like, right at this point, look at all these kids. Wouldn't it be nice to have a church elementary school? And we'll teach them the 3 R's in the church. You know what the 3 R's, Jonathan? What are they? What? Speak up, Jonathan. What are the 3 R's? Reading is one. What's the others? Gets harder. Reading is one. Hey, boy, you guys have got to read more books. Okay, Ethan. Or excuse me, Evan. Elena. Come on, you're getting coached by those women back there. Reading, writing with an R, and arithmetic with no A. The 3 R's. School, we're gonna, wouldn't that be great? We have a school. My goodness, we got a big old basement down there we don't use for very much. It just makes sense. We can hire a teacher, and she can whip you guys into shape. You'll know what the 3 R's are after she gets through with you. But we can't afford that. But maybe we could get 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 churches together, and we can all do it. Doesn't that sound like, and we're all good Christians. Where's the Bible talk about that? It's not there. Well, somebody says, well, wait a minute. Maybe it's just necessary. Expediency. What time is it? I got to hush sooner or later. This goes on and on. What about expediency? Expediency is not in the realm of silence. Let me see if I can explain it. Noah was commanded to build an ark. God didn't tell him what tools to use. There weren't any tools mentioned. But if you're going to build an ark, you got to have tools to build it. Other types of wood aren't specified. They're in the realm of silence. They told him to build it out of gopher wood. He couldn't build it out of oak, or he couldn't build it out of ash, couldn't build it out of walnut. It's supposed to be out of gopher wood. That's not expedient. All those other types weren't expedient. But the tools were necessary. The Lord's Supper requires specific elements. It requires bread and fruit of the vine. It's supposed to be served on the first day of the week. That's the example in Acts 20 and 7. What time of day would it be served? Well, specific. It's expedient. When's it expedient? Let's see. We could have had it at 4 o'clock this morning. How would that have worked? That's not expedient, you would say. Well, I can't get out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning. That doesn't make any sense. So we do it when it's expedient. But we do it on the first day of the week. How do we serve it? Well, there's several different ways we can serve it. We could have one big communion cup up here and one big loaf of bread. And their break breaks off a piece. Or we can have multiple communion cups and they're all up here and y'all all march up here and you all take it, march back. Some churches do that. Or we could pass it around and you can take it where you sit. All those are expediencies. The fact that it's bread and fruit of the vine is not part of the expediency. Anything else besides bread and fruit of the vine is in the area of silence. And we don't need, by the way, there are some churches that'll have a social meal. You know, donuts and coffee and all that sort of thing. That's not the Lord's Supper. And it's not necessary. It's not expedient. It's not a necessary thing to take the Lord's Supper. In fact, it's specifically forbidden in 1 Corinthians 11. Now notice some other things. You know, we looked at Noah, the Lord's Supper, singing. Singing is vocal. You know, singing is singing. Instruments are in the area of silence. The Bible doesn't say anything about those. The New Testament doesn't say anything about those instruments. It just doesn't mention them. Well, there's a lot of sincere people that play very well. It's beautiful, moving. But it's in the realm of silence. God didn't say anything about those instruments in the New Testament. Singing various parts. Now, somebody here sings bass, and somebody sings tenor, and somebody sings soprano. Still singing. It's a matter of expedience. Some of you can sing bass, some of you can't. It's just whatever you can sing. You can sing loudly or softly. That's expedience. Some of you on the back row sing really softly. You can sing a lot. We can sing 3 songs or 20. That's our choice. It's expedience. But playing on an instrument is not necessary. It is not expedient to singing. It's not necessary. We're told to assemble, which is what we've done this morning. That implies a place to assemble. We got to have a place to do that. Now then, Bob was fighting the lock getting in this morning. Said that the lock didn't work and he couldn't get in the door. I said, well, it's a warm day. We'll just have services out on the parking lot. We can do that. Maybe a little tough next week, but we could do that. It could be in a rented building. It can be a purchased building. It could be on private property in a home. These all are expedient to the command to assemble. We have to provide a place, some sort of place. And in that place, we can either stand through the whole thing or we can have chairs. There can be lights so we can see in the dark and the gloom. There can be seats. There can be a restroom. Otherwise, I can only be here. That's kind of limits the length of my sermons these days. I can only be here for so long, and so can you. And most of your kids have got to go to the bathroom 3 times during the service at least. And all the other things that are necessary to assemble. But a hospital A daycare center, a school, is not in any way necessary to assemble. You tried to jump into that area of silence. A thing has to be lawful in order to be expedient. All things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient in 1 Corinthians 10. All things are lawful but for me, but all things edify not. There may be specific items included in a general command as expedient. If there's no general command, there can't be anything expedient. Finally, you'll be glad for that. And again in Habakkuk 2 and verse 20. The Lord is in his holy temple, that all the earth keeps silence before him. It's time to be quiet and respect the silence of God. Now then, if you were baptized as a child, the Bible was silent about that. If you were baptized, but you were not baptized to save your soul, turn around, Delaney. Turn around, Michaela. If you were baptized, but it wasn't for the purpose of salvation, you need to be baptized again. You need to be baptized correctly, because the Bible didn't say anything about that sort of baptism. You were just getting wet. If you're here this morning and not a Christian, come while we stand and sing. Jesus will